Hello, family members. I hope you're having a nice day today. I want to talk to you today about something that's, very present for people of my generation right now. And it is how we are sort of in this sandwich generation right now. We've got children and in some cases grandchildren, in your 40s, that's sort of a thing. And still have living like parents and in some cases even grandparents that we're taking care of. We've got both the youth and the elderly depending on us. And of course, we also have jobs. And so it's very hard for millennials to be able to make time to actually physically be where each other are, you know? And sometimes you have to move from work or your partner's work. I have friends who've done that, or, friendships as adults become very complicated. And it's really hard for us to socially support our peers because, number one, we're busy, and number two, we know they're busy too. It's hard for me sometimes to ask for the time of my friends because I know they've got so much going on. They're working and they're dealing with, most of them are allo-romantic, have, boyfriends, girlfriends, husbands, wives, whatever. They got that. And a lot of them have kids. And, it gets really complicated really fast. They have to worry about their ailing mother, or their great aunt has dementia, or any number of things. And it can be very isolating. It's very easy to feel extremely alone, even when you're surrounded by a lot of people, when you're the one that everybody is looking to be the leader. And I think that, when my friend called me and she was talking about her situation, that really struck me. In her household, she is the leader. She's the mom. She's also, she's got a partner, but, he kind of looks to her in a lot of ways and not the other way around, and even in a lot of ways, she's the one who is expected to kind of like make things work with her ex-husband and co-parenting and all of this. Like, the leader, in order to lead, almost kind of has to take on this like untouchable, strong personality. There's an elder in my life that I love very much that has a very hard time with that, with any weakness. Feeling weak in any way is extremely difficult for them. And I think that's because they were the leader of their household. And even when they were a child, they were sort of the leader of their own lives, That's something my mom talks about a lot, actually, because she worked with kids. She was a school teacher, and I used to work with kids also, and there's some overlap. We knew some of the same kids because I worked in a group home with 12 to 17-year-olds, and she taught sixth grade. So some of the kids that I worked with were kids that either she taught or she had known or whatever. There was a lot of overlap. And so she's like, the kids that are the hardest are the ones who have been neglected because they've had to take care of themselves. And to have someone come and try to tell them how to do things feels very unnatural to them because they're the ones who always has to decide how to do things. I'm like, geez, that's That's tough. Man. How do you help a kid who feels like that, you know? But when you're in this like sandwich generation, we're all sort of forced into that leadership role to a certain extent, you know, unless we have a partner who takes that on for us. Not that that's very healthy, right? It's nice. Ideally, you would have a partner who would, like, you know, share the burden with you, but it doesn't seem to work like that. I don't know. Maybe this is just my aromantic, not understanding relationships, but it usually seems like, in my experience, it seems like there's somebody who is like this is how we get things done person, and the person is like, okay, I'll do what you told me to do, you know. And it's not necessarily like a male-female thing. I see it with all genders of partners. But it does seem like it is a thing. I will say that. It just, you know, you can feel so lonely even in a crowded room, you know, like this summer I had, you know, my goddaughter here, and she would have her little friends across the street come over. And the first couple of summers we did that, and it was nice and whatnot, but it was kind of lonely because even though I had those little girls around, I didn't have like adult companionship. And this last summer, my one friend was sort of, her moving situation was sort of in flux. She was trying to move into a better place, and she just came over here and stayed over here a lot of the time. And it was so nice just to have adults around to talk to occasionally, you know? Even though I had those kids around, you know, even though like you might be at work or whatever and actually physically have people around, doesn't mean that you don't necessarily feel lonely. You know, it's not something that I struggle with, but I know a lot of people my age struggle with aging. You know, our bodies aren't working the way they used to. You know, people bald, people get gray hair. And it's kind of hard and just not to be cool anymore. I think on some level, I think a lot of people were never cool, but they always thought that it's possible they could be cool, and that ship has sailed. You know, we're in our 40s. We're not going to be cool now, right? That's okay. You know, being cool is like being someone who is hip in the like youth culture, and that's for the youth. You know, it's their culture. We can appreciate it, but it's still theirs. We can't expect it to be ours. We had our time, you know. I guess that would be like the like emo times. I don't know. I kind of missed that. I was partying. I guess it's easy for me to be like, oh, it's all right that, you know, I'm not cool anymore, because I thought I was cool at one point in my life. And I was running around with a rock band in Central Florida and going to shows and going to parties and having a good time, just living my life, you know. Maybe people who didn't get that experience have a harder time, you know, transitioning to being middle-aged. You know, like if you didn't feel like you like actually lived your life, and then you realize, oh, you wake up and you're like, oh shit, I'm 40, that's got to be a heavy place. And I know that there's a lot of people my age who are probably feeling that, because they were probably just doing one thing to the next thing and to the next thing and to the next thing. And when you get to be in your 40s and 50s, that's when you become empty nester. So if your whole life was about, you know, having kids and doing all the things that kids need to do, like doctor's appointments and soccer practice and uh, choir show or whatever it is. All the things that kids do that keep you running around, and then all of a sudden you don't have that anymore. And that's a like a really tough place too. Having responsibility on you is hard, it's stressful. But also not having any responsibility can feel very draining, That's where I'm at because I'm disabled and I can't work and I can't really do much anything. My struggle with being middle-aged is that I feel like I can't take on responsibility, and it's like existentially destroying me. And I laugh, but I am 100% serious about that. It's really, 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 really psychically hard to know that I have elders in my life that need support. I have youth in my life that need support, and I have peers in my life that need support. And instead of being able to really support them the way I'd want to, I am in a position where I need to ask them for their support. Where are you, Osprey? She's on the desk. Okay. I just look up and there's like a cat, and I'm like, where the heck is she even at? I'm telling you, cats are always in weird places, aren't they? Anyway. So what do we do? Well, I think the most important thing that we have to do is understand that even if we don't get the quantity of social interaction with our peers that we would like, that we just appreciate it when we get it. Make sure that it's quality when you get it. That might be all you can do, And it's really frustrating, honestly, that, we have to kind of settle sometimes when it comes to actually having that in-person social interaction. But a trap I think we fall into is bemoaning that loss rather than just appreciating what we get when we get it, And the fact of the matter is there's lots of ways to communicate with each other, and you have to start realizing that a brief text here and there just to check in with each other, that isn't nothing. It's important, It's important just occasionally to message people that you love and care about and just be like, I'm thinking about you. Even if there's not much more to the interaction than that, it shows support. It helps build your found family, your community, your network. We need that. We are social human beings. And I say that as someone who is pretty antisocial. Like, I've lived alone for basically 10 years now. And I'm aromantic. I don't want a partner. And, I used to just go and hiking by myself in the woods with my dogs, and I would go long periods of time without ever seeing a person in person because I worked remotely and I lived in the middle of nowhere. But even I understand that I need social interaction. During the time, I was spending a lot of time going over to the coast, going to Daytona Beach and going to Hamburger Mary's and hanging out with the drag queens and the wait staff who were all queer and fun and exciting, and we had a good time. I'm still friends with people I met doing that, and that's always important, to make that social connection. But it was a lot easier then, right? When I was young and I had the energy and the time. and the availability to go be there and socially interact with people. And that's just not a privilege that many people in this sandwich generation have. You know, they just literally may not have the time. You know, I think about my brother and sister-in-law. They got 3 kids. You know, my brother works a full-time job. My sister-in-law is like doing grant work and all sorts of stuff with her old university. They're both scientists. You know, so she's working from home, but she's still working, right? They got to keep the house up. They got to take care of the kids. They got to do all this. It's a lot. It's a lot, you know. When the heck are they ever going to have time, you know? Because they get up first thing in the morning, get the kids ready for bed. You know, my brother gets home from work and they got to get the kids, you know, kind of ready down for bedtime, and then the whole thing starts all over again. You know, like, and then of course on weekends, that's when anything that needs to be done that couldn't be done during the week gets done, right? So when are they available? When are they supposed to spend time socializing with anybody? You know? And they're not the only parents that are living like that. You know, I have some friends who are like co-parents, and occasionally they get to have a little time to themselves if their co-parent is actually trustworthy enough to take care of their own child for a while, or children. But, you know, for the most part, people my age that have children just do not have much free time to do things that don't involve their children. You know, a lot of the time when I see my friends in person that I see in person, it is with their children because they're moms. That's, you know, like their kids gotta be somewhere. They gotta be with someone. And so they're usually going to be with their mom. And so in order to hang out with the mom, the kids are around. Well, I don't mind that at all. But not everybody is you know, able to enjoy themselves and relax and have fun in the presence of a lot of kids running around. Some people, that's too much. That's too stressful. And so they don't have that avenue. You know, being childless in the sandwich generation can be just as difficult as having children in the sandwich generation, because it's so much harder to be able to socialize with your peers, because most of your peers are going to have kids. I do have some childless friends, but I also have a lot of friends with kids too. And it really complicates your relationships when you have people in your life that have kids, people in your life that don't have kids and are cool with them, and people in your life who don't have kids and really don't like them. And that can make everything like super complicated, right? And, you know, trying to find a way to keep a friend group together is, I mean, that is something. I have a cousin who is a travel agent, and she and her like girlfriends from back in the day occasionally will do like a girls trip together. That's pretty much the only way that you can do that. And if you're not in the position to be able to do a girls trip, if you can't afford it, can't take the time off, whatever, then you're going to have a really hard time socializing with your friends at our age. And I don't think that I really understood how stressful it was going to be to change my mindset from being the child to being the child of an elderly parent, or elderly parents, because both my parents are living, and they're both in their 70s and they're aging, and it's not always easy for them to be honest with themselves about that. And, you know, it's delicate. It's a really delicate thing to have to navigate, you know. I imagine that it's difficult in a lot of ways for parents to kind of learn how to navigate a relationship with a child that's become an adult. That's not something I've had to deal with yet, but I do have some friends who have kids who are in their like 20s, which is wild. And it's been interesting to see how their parent-child relationship changes. And it makes me wonder how things are going to be with my goddaughter when she gets to be an adult and when she's going to be 13 in a month. So I still have a little while, but, you know, you've got to navigate transitions in your relationships with your youth and your elders, and at the same time transitions with how you relate to your peers. You know, one thing that I don't think that I really appreciated enough when I was younger is how friends can come in and out of your life. Like, I have some friends that are basically like boomerangs. Even, even when something tears us apart, eventually we'll come back together. And it's usually a good thing. You know, I have a friend that I cut off all contact. I went no contact with them. And it was hard because they were extremely close to me. And I knew their family. They knew my family. We all went to the same church. You know, like, it was a really awkward thing. But I wasn't living there physically, so I think that helped somewhat. And then eventually she was like, you know, I wanted to try to fix this. And we were able to fix it. And now we can be close again. And I never saw that coming. You know, I didn't know that was going to be a thing. Osprey, are you a superstar? She just loves disrupting this video, apparently. Yeah. You know, I think there's a lot of things that we don't understand how heavy it's going to be. You know, it's like a parent dealing with their child's first pet dying, you know, and that awful feeling of having to deal with that. And, you know, being a parent means wanting to shield your child from awful things, and yet you couldn't in this particular situation. Oh, you brat. You're just going to show your ass? She's purring like you cannot believe. I wish you could hear this. Oh, gosh. You little brat. Oh, spice spray. Anyway. Well, this is what I'm talking about. We got all these little creatures around us trying to get our attention. And how are we ever going to spend any time on ourselves or our peers? Even though this is the time when our peers need us as much as ever. Because we need people who understand all the transitory stresses that we're dealing with. We need peers. We need to be able to maintain these relationships. We need to be able to rekindle relationships that we had allowed to go dormant, and not think of it as a less important friendship just because there was a period of dormancy. You know, it's nice when you have people in your life who you have that history with. Oh, she is giving me a look. I'm telling you, cats. I guess I better stop doing what I'm doing and pet this cat, because she is rather insistent, I imagine. Or I guess for whatever reason. Oh, you're going to spice spray again, huh? All right. Well, family members, I hope you have a lovely evening. Reach out to your friends and family members. You know, don't feel afraid to acknowledge all of the crap that you're dealing with, and ask for help when you need it. All right. Spray. You want one last close up? What a weird look on your face, you strange cat. All right, family members, take care of yourself. I'll talk to you later. Bye.